All right, now let's spend a little bit of time on the connection layer. And in the connection layer, that's where you connect to your source data. There are two types, live and extract. And basically, live does what it sounds like. You're connecting to whatever that data source in real time. So anytime changes are made to that source data, your visualizations are automatically updated and have access to that data. But Tableau also allows you to connect to data via something called an extract, and we'll talk more about extracts now. So what is it? So first of all, a Tableau data extract, or TDE, is a saved subset of your data, of your data model. And we'll obviously be talking about the data model in just a few minutes. But it's a saved subset, so it's no longer a live or real-time connection to the source data. So why would you use a data extract? A Tableau data extract? And you'll hear me just use the term extracts mostly from here on out. Well, it's often used to improve the performance while you're using Tableau, especially when you're the source data that you're connecting to is big data, especially the V of volume. You just have a lot of data, or at least that's one of the main components. So you want to improve your performance or take advantage of certain Tableau functionality that may not be supported in your original source data. You can, by using an extract, reduce the total amount of data that is available to your visual analytics by using filters and configuring other limits like aggregations as an example. So you're able to go from in a large source data to something that's smaller and therefore more efficient to use. Now, extracts can be refreshed with the underlying source data, and there are two ways to do this, and clearly you would want to do this because once you have your extract, that extract and any changes to that source data, now there's a disconnect between the visualizations and the visual analytics you're doing and the underlying data. So you want to be able to refresh your extract, and you could either do a full refresh, which replaces all the contents in your extract, or an incremental refresh, which only adds whatever new rows have been added to your source data since the previous refresh. So what are the advantages of using a Tableau data extract? I've already covered a couple of them, but it supports large data sets. So for example, there are certain limitations to the kind of normal source data applications that we're used to using, like Excel and various databases, etc. So when you start getting into big volume big data V for volume of data sets, you may need to or have to use an extract. It's fast to create your visualizations, so therefore it helps to improve your performance. As I mentioned already, it supports some additional functionalities such as calculating count distinct, and it allows you to work with your data offline. So if you're flying, which I know we're not doing very much these days, from Orlando to San Francisco for a business meeting, which again I know we're not doing much these days, and you want to work on your visualizations, you could do that with an extract and a laptop when you're unable to have an actual online connection. So So why use a data extract? Some of this I've already talked about, but if a live connection to the data source is not possible because you're traveling, as an example, or because you're providing someone outside your organization to a particular viz, but since they're outside of your organization, they don't have access rights to the underlying production system whose data is being used in the visualization. In that case, you'd want to use an extract so that they can work on the visualizations. There's lots of issues with data extracts solving the problem of too slow. And too slow can come about or have various meanings. Maybe where the live data is located, the network in which it's located, in which you'll be using to work with that data, it just might be a slow network. And therefore, that's just slowing down the analysis that you're able to do in Tableau. It could, and we've already talked numerous times already, that extracts are optimized to perform better and therefore speed up the processing. Tableau queries, right? The VizQL, right? The visualizations that you're creating might actually slow down the production system. So if you're using a ERP system and you're extracting data out of it and you're using it in various visualizations, and you've built dashboards that managers are using throughout the organization, as they're using that, and as the VizQL model, which we'll talk about later, is going into that ERP system and querying it and pulling data to update dashboards and other visualizations, it's possible that could slow down the ERP system or whatever the underlying system is that is maintaining that data. So in that case, you wouldn't want to slow down your everyday day-to-day transaction system because Tableau is running queries. So that would be another reason for using data extracts. And then I mentioned this already a few times. The V of volume in big data could lead to a slow live connection or whereas you can aggregate data and therefore reduce the volume via an extract. Extracts can handle billions of records, and that's clearly larger than what you could load in Excel or Access or other types of databases. You can actually implement various security by using data extracts, because when you create a data extract, you could filter data for only necessary records and leave the more or leave the records that a particular individual should not have access to out of the extract. You could exclude columns, same idea there. You could aggregate the data, therefore hiding the level of detail of the records. You could aggregate the data and therefore provide some security. And when I'm talking about security with filtering records and filtering columns and aggregating data, I'm talking about security in the sense of the person who is using Tableau to create the various visualizations. Obviously, they're able to see the underlying data. Otherwise, they couldn't create the visualizations. If there is some data that they should not be seeing, should not have access to, an extract can be used to filter and or aggregate the data so that the user who's then creating the visualization still can, but won't have access to that data that they shouldn't. And that's what I mean by securing the data. Remember, and if you don't remember, you should kind of look this up, but when you save a Tableau visualization in a TWBX format, it includes all the data in a worksheet. Everything, but it does. You're not going to be doing that if you're using a table extract. Some disadvantages are, by definition, you're not using real-time data. That's what the live connection is for. So you have to be cognizant of that and cognizant of when the various refreshes are going to be done. And then another disadvantage, especially if you're doing full refreshes, but could also occur with incremental, depending on the number of transactions that are building up in between incremental refreshes. It could just be slow in refreshing your extract. Next, I just want to talk about combining data, right? So when you've made that connection, right, in the connection layer, you're connecting to, or you can connect to either a single source data. Here it says database, but it could be a database or an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF file or many other data types. Or you could connect to multiple data types. Now I'm not going to go through everything on these tables. You could read through them, but it's important to understand that in order to relate tables across different source data, they must be added as data connections within the same data source, not a new data source. And this is going to become clear as I take you through a couple of illustrations. So here we've made a connection to the Superstore Excel spreadsheet. And notice that right next to where it says connections, you see the word add. If you click on that, that brings up the normal, add a connection that we're used to seeing. But notice that it says right under that, add a new connection to use cross-database joins. Now, we're going to talk about joins later on, but what this is saying is that if we want to add another source of data in addition to the Superstore spreadsheet, and we want to be able to combine using joins primarily with the Superstore source data and some other source data, you're going to want to do that. In other words, you want to create a cross-database join. You can only do that by clicking on that link there where it says add. You can also add another or new data source, and you can see on the same illustration where we have our Superstore data source. If you click that drop-down arrow and then click on new data source, again, you get the typical connection screen where you're choosing from the different data types, but notice that this time it says data sources contain one or more connections, right? So that's just your typical thing. If you open up a connection this way, then you won't be able to do multiple database joins. So it's important to understand the distinction between the two.